All right, Alexander, let's talk about Biden and Iran. Let's also talk a little bit, touch upon Biden and China, because he made some statements about China as well. Let's start with Iran, though. And I guess my main question is that on the one hand, you have the JCPOA and trying to revive that. On the other hand, it looks like the U.S. is gearing up for some sort of conflict, proxy conflict, or something going on. I'm not going to say a war, but some sort of, they're stirring up some sort of trouble as well. So you have these two kind of conflicting issues. What do you make of Biden's Iran policy so far, if there is, if you can even call it a policy?
Well, there isn't one. I mean, this has been now, I think, the pattern in the first few weeks of this administration. We have an administration which talks simultaneously hard and soft without having very much coherence. On the one hand, they insist that Donald Trump's decision to pull out of the JCPOA was a bad thing. I mean, they are opposed to that. The JCPOA with Iran was, of course, Barack Obama's great flagship foreign policy. And Biden, as we know, is still very committed to Obama, and Obama still exercises huge influence over the administration. At the same time, Biden, during the period, or rather the Democrats, let's not talk about Biden so much, during the period of the previous administration of Donald Trump, forged all sorts of alliances with the neocons, and there are lots of neocons in the administration. And these people, of course, are strongly opposed to Iran, and they want wars, or they want to start wars in the Middle East as part of a policy of reshaping the Middle East, which is an agenda they've had going all the way back to the 1990s, regime changes, wars, all that sort of thing. So on the one hand, you have a desire to improve relations with Iran, which is the sort of Obama part of the administration. On the other hand, you want more confrontation with Iran, which is the neocon part of the administration. So now you have this extraordinary policy, which is, yes, we will go back to the JCPOA, which we left and we broke. But before we do that, and before we lift all the sanctions that Donald Trump imposed, we want the Iranians to give up on further uranium enrichment, which they did in response to our decision to, or rather the Trump administration's decision to pull out of the JCPOA. So in effect, they're saying, yes, we were wrong to pull out of the JCPOA, but no, we're not actually going to go back into the JCPOA unless the Iranians first do what we provoke them into doing. And of course, the Iranians, very understandably, are saying no, because they will argue that if they give up on nuclear enrichment, the United States has no incentive in that case to go back into the JCPOA. So it's stalemate, because the two parts of the Biden administration cannot decide what they're going to do. Barack Obama had a coherent policy towards Iran. He wanted a rapprochement with Iran, and therefore he pursued and eventually got the JCPOA. Donald Trump had a coherent policy towards Iran. He wanted to push the Iranians, the Ayatollahs, into a broader agreement which would include ballistic missiles and Iranian foreign policy actions in the Middle East. And so he pulled out of the JCPOA. The Biden administration has no policy at all. It can't decide whether it wants rapprochement with Iran via the JCPOA, going back into the JCPOA, or whether alternatively it prefers to confront them and stick with the policy that the Trump administration had as it pursues confrontation with Iran. And that's actually more dangerous, because in a stalemate situation, the hardliners, the people who want confrontation, tend to win through. And with the neocons so strong in the administration, and looking so much for wars that they can start in the Middle East, it's very easy to see how, probably without this being exactly intended, the United States could drift into some kind of confrontation with Iran that it hasn't really planned.
Yeah, but is that the policy? That's what they want. That's what they're aiming for, is to get into some sort of conflict. Because if they really wanted to solve the JCPOA, they would. I mean, and what's the pressure that Israel is putting on the Biden administration? Are they putting pressure on the Biden administration in the same way they put on the Trump administration, or what's going on there?
Well, absolutely they are. The Israel does want to see a continuation of the confrontation with Iran, because that Israel perceives, or says it perceives, Iran as an existential threat to itself. Not just Israel, of course, Saudi Arabia too. The point is that the Biden administration doesn't actually get on very well with Israel. I mean, Biden hasn't yet spoken to Netanyahu. Just as Obama didn't get on with Netanyahu, it seems that Biden doesn't get on very well with Netanyahu either. So yes, there is this push from Israel for a continuation of the Trump administration's policies towards Iran. But it's not quite clear that the Biden administration as a whole has decided to do that. They seem, as I said, to have no clear idea what they're doing. So on the one hand, they say they want to go back into the JCPOA, and on the other hand, they say it's for Iran to make the first move, and if they don't make the first move, the Trump policies in effect continue. It's an unsustainable vacuum of a policy, and given, as I said, how entrenched the neocons are within this administration, you can't help but worry that sooner or later that will lead to a confrontation in some form, not just with Iran, but with other Middle East powers also.
All right, so we've said many times that Biden's team, as he was putting his team together, we said that it looked very much like an Obama, not even a B team, an Obama C team. I mean, just, very, not even Obama would have had these people in his cabinet.
No.
And even though they're Obama, cronies, definitely Biden chose the C people in Blinken and all these guys, and Sullivan and these people. But how are these guys, if they can't handle Iran and they can't form a coherent policy against Iran, obviously the next question is, how are they going to handle a country like China, especially given what we know about China's, how should we put this, China's information and their influence on Joe Biden and certain members of his family? How are they going to deal with China in this regards, which is a much more powerful, stronger adversary than Iran is?
Absolutely. Can I just say, I mean, China is an immeasurably more powerful country than Iran, and a far more, powerful challenge to the United States than Iran is or could ever be. And the fundamental difference also is that, Iran has a rather chaotic government. China has a very united and purposeful government, one which knows very clearly its own mind, which in a situation where the United States, or at least the Biden administration, doesn't appear to know its own mind, and as you correctly said, where some of its members have very strong connections and links to China, going back a long way, that is going to be, frankly, rather worrying, because, if you're up against someone like China, which knows what it wants, and you don't know what you want, you can get yourself into very, very serious trouble. So you have someone like John Kerry, who is now supposedly the climate czar, the Biden administration's climate czar, and who, as we know, has had many interactions with with China, and members of whose family have had, business deals with China, as members of someone else's family have also had business deals with China. Kerry apparently wants good relations with China, and he wants to forge ahead and develop an agreement with China on the climate change topic. He wants, as he says, to isolate the issue, the topic of climate change from all of the others, and he wants to delink it so that the US can continue to impose tariffs, do all sorts of things, but he can somehow agree with the Chinese on climate change. The Chinese have utterly rejected that. They said that is absolutely not going to happen. As far as they're concerned, if they're going to talk with the US about climate change, they want to talk about trade, they want to talk about Taiwan, they want to talk about the South China Sea, they want to talk about the full range of relations. But that's Kerry's idea, hopeless and impractical as it is. It still constitutes some sort of outreach towards China, even though it's one the Chinese are rejecting. But then you get the man who is supposed to be in charge, Biden himself. So he comes along, he goes to the State Department, he makes these incredibly strange comments about China. He talks about China and the United States being an extremely tough competition, which appears to, go back to the things that Trump said. He also says that he gets on well with Xi Jinping, even though Xi Jinping doesn't have a democratic bone in his body. That's what Biden again says. He also says that he wants to pursue China, a relationship with China based on international rules. But again, what does that even mean? And you get responses from the Chinese which are, again, withering. I mean, you see that once more, the Chinese are saying none of this makes any conceivable sense. And this is Global Times, which, as we know, is the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. And it makes comments like this. Different people have seen different things from what Biden said. Some people focus on his emphasis that China and the US need not have a conflict and believe this is different from the Trump administration. Others focus on extreme competition, claiming that Biden has sent a tough signal to China. And then, of course, it goes on to say, in the Global Times' opinion, Biden has predicted that there will be extreme competition between China and the US. Yet, he has set a bottom line for this, which is to avoid turning such competition into a major power conflict. And then Global Times goes on to say, to be honest, China is not afraid of competing. So the Chinese are happy to have competition because, as far as they can see, with this very incoherent administration, which talks tough towards China, but isn't prepared to go all the way and confront China, that competition, that extreme competition, which Biden is talking about, is going to be skewed in China's favour because China, as Global Times says, knows that there is a bottom line whereby the US under Biden will never look for, I use again Global Times' words, a major power conflict with China. So the Chinese know they can push and they can push and they can push, and then in the end the United States will never push back.
Yeah, I would feel confident if I was China as well. All right.
If you read their media, they are supremely confident. I am sure the Chinese are looking at what's coming out of Washington and are absolutely delighted. They are probably more pleased with all of this than they would be if the Biden administration simply said that we want good relations with China, because in that case, they know, the Chinese would know that as part of a policy of open rapprochement, there would be pushback against it from some people in the United States. This incoherent policy in which you don't know your own mind gives the Chinese the best of all worlds, because they can go on pushing and they know that there's never going to be a real pushback from the US. So this is, from their point of view, the optimal position that the United States has maneuvered itself into.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. A complete completely disorganized and incoherent foreign policy team.
Absolutely.
That's how Biden's shaping up to be.
Absolutely. The president himself doesn't know his own mind. Well, that's not a surprise. We've discussed this many times. His Secretary of State is a lightweight. And there are no real agreements within the administration about what they really want, be it with Iran, which is worrying and potentially dangerous, but also with China, when the challenge is existential.
Yeah, very unimpressive people, like we said. C-team.
Yeah.
It's a
C-team.
It's a foreign policy cabinet just stacked with C-team players. It's not going to end well.
Absolutely.
All right, Alexander Vickers, thank you very much, guys. PayPal, Patreon, subscribe, Star Bitcoin. You'll find those links down below. It really helps out this channel. Also, look for Alexander's channel in the description box down below. Look for my channel, description box down below. Look for all of our channels, including the Duran, on BitChute, on Odyssey, on Rumble. We're on all the platforms. Look for us there. All the links are in the description box. And of course, the most important link in the description box down below is that of the Duran shop, where you can pick up some great merchandise, maybe a long sleeve, a sweatshirt, some awesome magic mugs.
And hoodies also, and amazing hats. You can see like these, brilliant hats. And the viewers who buy these products from our shop always say what wonderful products they are. So you're supporting the Duran by coming to our shop, and you'll be delighted by the things you find there. And please come to our next program, and we look forward to having you again on the with us as we do programs on the Duran.
All right, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.